This is what it looks like. Thank you so much for this incredible honor. It is such a joyous occasion to be with you here today. Forget the rain, forget the moment, forget the stress, forget the studying, forget the classes you had to redo, forget all the money you had to scrimp to pay. Forget all those things for a moment and breathe this moment in. Don't be someplace else. Don't live in the past or the future. Live here in this place right now. This is an incredible moment for everybody. Thank you, President Hertzberger. Thank you, faculty, trustees, parents, community members, and of course, the students for this incredible honor. As Professor Zappia noted, I was blessed to teach for a short time at USC and, sorry, Occidental. They might win the football games, but you guys will rule the world, don't worry. But let me turn to the faculty members first, because as you know well, teaching college students is challenging, maddening, energizing, and ultimately amazing. I loved so much and missed so much my teaching years. I used to joke that back then I had all the time in the world to think about how I could change the world and no power to do anything about it. Now I have power to do something about it and I have no time to think. So if we can figure out a way for us to always pause in life and see how each one of us can act, as well as the ways that we must think, our faculty here has given you that gift. I also want to thank you for the doctorate. That's incredible. Reminds me of the old joke about the first Jewish president. His mother's watching him being sworn in, and the man next to her turns and says, "Aren't you so proud? Your son, he's the president of the United States, the first Jewish president." She goes, "It's all right. But his brother, he's a doctor." So now, I'm a doctor, so my Jewish mother can be very, very happy. And I want to thank Chris Caldwell, such a dear, dear friend, for that amazing introduction. I've known Chris and his husband, Rich Llewellyn, who serves as my chief counsel now, and their two kids, Robbie and your fellow grad, Rosie, for nearly 20 years. And it is a joy for me to be here celebrating not one, but two Caldwell-Llewellyn poets, because we got Robbie from the class of 2013 here as well. And long before society believed or thought that two men or two women could raise children, Chris and Rich were busy doing just that, raising two children. And not just any children, but Robbie and Rosie. You know, history is made by people that are all around us. It's not just the people we read in history books. It's names often forgotten. And it's so easy to read history because it seems like it sweeps by with very little effort. Page 67, you have slavery ending, and page 122, women get the right to vote. Farm workers organize, and page 186. But when you're in the midst of that struggle, writing those words, those sentences, those paragraphs, and those pages can move so slowly. You have two authors of that history right here, four with the family. And I hope that the Supreme Court learns from their example, acknowledges the boundlessness of families, stands up for love, and makes marriage equality a reality. So like many assignments, I waited for this one to the last minute. The lesson there is you can wait till the last minute and still be successful in life. It's okay. But with that, I ask you to bear with me as I read through my notes here and try to speak from the heart at a moment in your life that I know you will never forget. You might not remember the words that I say, but I want you to be left with the spirit of this moment and the possibility as you're perched on this precipice of life. You know, when I left Los Angeles to come to Whittier today, I crossed a number of municipal borders. But as a native Angelino, this place and this moment still feels like home. But this is what I want to talk to you about today, the idea of crossing and embracing borders. We've all crossed borders to be here today. Some of them are physical. You've come from these nations of the world, from states and cities outside of Whittier. Some have come just from down the block, but we've all crossed borders to be here. Some of those borders are temporal. This is one of those moments when you cross over that border of time. As Winston Churchill said, this is not the end, it's not even the beginning of the end. but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. And as we look at the borders that we cross, each time we cross a border, it gives us both a sense of unease and excitement. John F. Kennedy, when he accepted the nomination to become President of the United States, did that in Los Angeles here. And he gave his famous speech about building a new frontier in America. But a less known part of that speech, he talked about Los Angeles, which he called the last frontier, a place where people went and settled and came to. And today, as we look at that human spirit, that impulse, we are all explorers. We are all movers, all travelers. We are seekers, intrepid wanderers who cross borders, whether it's the original inhabitants of this land that was here, who crossed the Bering Strait, the Tongva, who we recognize and honor in our midst, whether it's those who came involuntarily in chains and shackles. We crossed borders to come to this moment. But we also know that each boundary we cross gives us a sense of unease. Even today, you probably feel that. The immigrant, the refugee, the traveler, the student, the peacemaker, and yes, indeed, the graduate, is faced with looking at both sides of a border some would call a boundary. College is just that sort of border, where you come to new land, where you explore new life, where you explore new ideas, you explore even new love. This same impulse brought me here today. My grandparents and great-grandparents crossed borders to come to this city. On my father's side, a grandfather who was born in the midst of war in Mexico, who lost his father when he was 1 year old in that revolution and was carried by my bisabuela, my great-grandmother, across the border in her arms to a land unknown to come here and make a new life. On my mother's side of the family, my Jewish side, they fled the pogroms of Russia, of the Russian Empire, where Jews were being killed and conscripted, and left everything behind to come to the same place, to cross an ocean, just as my grandfather and grandmother had crossed a river. They grew up here in this place, first on the east side of Los Angeles, and then in South Los Angeles and West Los Angeles. They passed on a spirit and a love of possibility of this border town to me when I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I grew up both confused and happy to be part of a border family, a Jewish-Mexican hybrid with an Italian last name, a kosher burrito, as some have referred to me, something that prepared me before I knew it to lead a city that is the most diverse place on the face of the earth, not just today, but the most diverse collection of human beings in our human history. Los Angeles today is a city that reflects what this country will be soon, and what the world already is. It's a place where you can see the face of the world on the streets of Los Angeles, and it prepared me, just as I hope it has prepared you, for when you set out from Los Angeles, when I found myself drawn to the streets of other places in Mumbai or Cairo or Mexico City, I saw the face of Los Angeles on the streets of the world. It taught me how to navigate between cultures. It taught me how to feel both like the stranger and the native, no matter where I was. Growing up, I never quite knew how to process that. I just felt like me. Was I a mongrel or a mestizo? Well, was I Jewish or Latino? Was I an insider or an outsider? I was all of those. Each one of us, no matter what our culture currents are unique. We are, in some ways, the first border ever crossed. And for many of you, you're crossing a different border as the first in your family to ever graduate from college. Proud that almost 30%, I think, of you, this will be the first degree that somebody in your family earns. But it takes courage to do so. It takes courage for your families who have taken those steps to bring you here. It takes courage for your classmates who have helped you through those tough times. And ultimately, the bravery rests with you, that you came here and that you marched forward in a time in which so much is unknown. Today, we live in a very difficult time. We are in a time where the divides that you face as graduates are the most profound that we have seen in many generations. The divides between rich and poor, the divides between people of different faiths and nationalities, the divides between thought and dogma, From the Middle East to Baltimore, we see conflict in our human family. We can flip on Fox or MSNBC, and what passes as politics is people yelling at each other. Instead of crossing borders, we are erecting boundaries between us. So the challenge I issue to you, poets, is to see what you can do to turn those boundaries back into borders and to keep crossing them every day of your lives. Whittier stands in contrast to that diagnosis of the world. Like LA, Whittier is a border town, and this is a border college. It was born out of a commitment to diversity, a college named for John Greenleaf Whittier, a poet and abolitionist. A college committed to the rights of all and to educating all, not just those who look like me and speak like me and think like me, educating even poets. Let us not weakly weep, nor rashly threaten. Give us grace to keep our faith and patience. John Greenleaf Whittier wrote in a Civil War poem, A Word for the Union, speaking movingly of the borders that both unite and divide us. In this insecure time where you're the first generation who may not earn as much as your parents did if we don't find a way to compete globally. In this generation where you won't just find one job in one company and stick with it, but you will have 5 or 6 changes, complete careers in your lifetime. In this insecure time when we don't know if economic progress is a given, when the earth itself is challenged with climate change, while we're out of recession but we face deep inequality, your success will be dictated by how well you can navigate the border, how fluent you are with the culture of the world. You must negotiate those borders, whether they are color, class, neighborhood, sexual orientation, belief, geography, gender identity, disability. You have to navigate those if you are going to win in the world that we have before us. But borders do confound us. For instance, when Chicanos go to Mexico and they think they're going to the homeland and they realize that there are as much outsiders there as sometimes they have felt here in America, I'm reminded of what Carlos Fuentes, the great Mexican poet, wrote. He said, "Yo no soy mexicano, yo no soy gringo, yo no soy chicano, yo no soy gringo en los Estados Unidos y mexicano en México, soy chicano en todas partes. No tengo que asimilarse a nada. Tengo mi propia historia." He said, I'm not a Mexican, I'm not a gringo, I'm not a Chicano, I'm not a gringo in the United States and a Mexican in Mexico. I'm a Chicano, that idea of being mixed and part of this in all parts, everywhere. I don't have to assimilate to anyone and to anything. I have my own history. You see, the border allows you to write your own history, to be who you are, to navigate between these boundaries. And I hope that you feel as excited as I do about the idea of crossing those borders. Back in the day, there were clear lines, clear camps and identities. Those might have been comforting to some, but they weren't the truth. You need to make sure that no matter where you are on the political spectrum, you always think for yourself. Look at an issue and challenge, as this education has taught you, to come up with your own perspectives. You see, boundaries can be real, but they can also block understanding. I'll give you an example of how a boundary has become now a border that we cross. Just before you were born, here, this city was ripped apart by riots, in which the same divide that now many challenge across the country between those who keep us safe, our police officers and community, was ripped apart by a beating of a man named Rodney King. And as the city burned, people challenged and looked at Los Angeles and said, Los Angeles' diversity is a weakness. Will Koreans ever understand African Americans and Anglos and Latinos? We'll cut forward some 25 years later, and as I travel the world as mayor of this great city, I meet with mayors like the mayor of Seoul, Korea, who said, how do we get to be more like you? We need more diversity if we're going to succeed. In just one generation, what was seen as a weakness, a boundary, has become a border that we now cross. It is the strength of our town that over 220 languages are spoken, that over 115 countries of origin are here, that 39 countries have their largest populations outside the home country here in Los Angeles, that everybody can come to LA and feel like this is their second home. That is a boundary that has become a border. Many of your families crossed borders to come here, both literal and metaphorical. Many of you, as I mentioned, are the first. While boundaries can harm us, borders can connect us. I loved what Jay said. Where's Jay? Where'd she go? Back there in a seat. We did not compare our speeches, but you said the same thing. You talked about we're together. I got you. Hashtag brothers and sister. We have to take this moment to take all the fear that we have, all the excitement that you feel, and to cross that border. But let me leave you with one last thing. We also have to be not just border crossers, but we have to be kind. We have to find that this degree that you have been given today, this power that is represented on this piece of paper, is used for good in this world. Who amongst you will be willing to cross the borders to bring together police and community in this country? Who will be willing to cross the borders of divided government and divided choices? Who will cross the border to lift people out of crushing poverty, 1 million people just in the city of LA out of 4 million? Who will be willing to cross the borders of immigration status, to take the images of people surrounding a bus full of children who are just looking for their parents and say that we are human beings first? Who of you will be the border crossers who will find the love in your hearts to make sure as you move through this world, you move with the ethics that you have been taught by this degree too? The feeling you have right now is the feeling of fear and excitement of the migrant. You're leaving this physical space, your home. You are migrating today. But it is also the migrant of time, who's capping off these 4 years of human growth, of friendships, of failures, of successes, of loves earned, of loves lost, of ideas consumed, rejected, and thought through. Borders and kindness will lead you to a faith that Whittier's founders brought when they founded this city and this college, a faith that your parents have and had in you, a faith that you must find in yourself, a faith that a better day and a better way is just around the corner. And so let me leave you with a poet's words, Marge Piercy. She wrote, "Who shall bear hope but you, my other flesh? All of us who have seen the face of hope, at least once in a vision, in dream, in marching, who sang hope rising like a conjured snake, who found its flower about timberline by a melting glacier. Hope sleeps in our bones, like a bear waiting for spring to rise and walk. So poets, rise and walk and cross that border. Be kind and find that hope. The world awaits you. Congratulations."